perfectionism kills creativity. And it's like, okay, I'm going to write a bad story then.
Don't worry about structure. Don't even think about that stuff. Get it on the page.
The Book of Life, Maya and the Three, Dave the Barbarian, Niko and the Sword of Light, A Tale Dark and Grim, Vampirina. If you've seen any of these, then you've seen the work of Doug and Candie Langdale. With over 20 years of experience as writers and showrunners, they're here today to reveal the inside world of animated television. How do you start your own TV show? What makes a show truly memorable? What are some rookie writer mistakes? And how can you avoid them?
Hello, Candie and Doug. Welcome to Write for Animation. It is so great to have you here. We finally meet over Zoom.
Uh-huh.
It's nice to be here.
Yes, it is.
So I would love to start with a more general question about the spark and the love for animation, how it started for both of you, and also how you became this writer duo and became partners in life and in art.
I guess most kids watch cartoons. It's the ones who continue watching cartoons into adulthood are the ones who are really into
when you're like 14 and you realize your friends aren't watching cartoons anymore and you're like, that's weird.
Yeah. I always loved them because they were moving art.
Yeah.
And that felt beautiful to me.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of obsessed with cartoons when I was little, and then I kept watching them. I started making short cartoons in middle school. Actually, I think I made my first one in like 8th grade. And then I was going to be a physicist, and then I was going to be a comedian, and then I was going to be an actor. So I got a theater degree and did some theater and did a lot of improv. And then improv is a place a lot of animation writers come from. So I met a guy who was writing for animation and started doing it then. I came back to my first love.
Yeah.
Well, probably being an astronaut would have been my second love.
Was there a moment where you realized that this could be a profession, that I'm going to go full on and turn this into the way I make a living?
Somewhere in the 80s, I was like, oh, people write cartoons for a living. Like, I realized that I think I was watching like Thundercats or something and like looking at the credits and going, oh, this is an actual thing. And I believe that the US company that was involved in that show was headquartered near where I lived. And I was like, that's an actual place. And like, people really do this. And then a few years later, I met someone who worked in animation and started pitching stuff. When were you aware of it, and when did it seem like a real possibility?
I don't know. I have a degree in graphic design. I came in it from the other end. And I don't know. It just seemed like it was too cool for words. I couldn't imagine that I would be able to do that, even though I was always a good writer. It seemed too amazing.
I mean, we both have some amount of art background and some amount of writing background. And it's super helpful in communicating with artists to at least be able to draw a little so that you have some understanding of what they're doing. Like, I mean, I'll sometimes draw things to get the idea across, but even if you don't do that, like being able to understand why things are done a certain way and why things are composed a certain way, I think makes it a lot easier to communicate with the people you're working with.
I'm a very visual person, so I didn't know that would translate into writing, even though it obviously does, because you see it in your head before you put it on the paper. Well, I guess it's not paper anymore. Before you put it on the screen, you see it in your head.
It taps into the importance of visual writing. I see that a common mistake is to write as a novelist, write as an author and dig really into the inner life of the characters. Can you describe somebody? Because that it's very interesting that you bring up the side of a writer that also has some creative artistic skills. And what we observe a lot is that we have a lot of people in our audience that come from the artistic side. Maybe they're story artists or they're concept designer. but they don't see themselves as writers, while I believe they are actually writing with, a storyboard artist is a writer, a director, and there's a lot going on. Can you give some guidelines on, like, almost words of encouragement for them to step into writing and realize that, when you write with picture, they're not required to write a novel, to really have beautiful language and evocative language. And I would love to hear that as if you were talking to an artist that sees screenwriting as this mysterious stuff.
I would say that even if you haven't developed your writing skill, you're still a storyteller. And that's the most important part, is being a storyteller, because there are a lot of people who have the skill of writing, but it doesn't necessarily make them a storyteller. But there's people like Jorge Gutierrez, who is a storyteller and a writer and an artist, but he is a storyteller. And I think being a storyteller is the skill.
Calling yourself a writer is almost a misnomer. You are a storyteller. I mean, people are hardwired to appreciate stories and hardwired to tell stories.
Well, it goes back so far in humanity, storytelling.
Well, there's the line I wrote for Book of Life. We're nothing more or less than the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Storytelling is an intrinsic part of being a human being. And you can tell those stories in pictures, or you can tell those stories in words. You can sing those stories. You can dance
the stories.
Yeah. People who are doing storyboards, it's in the name. They're telling stories.
Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned, the beautiful line that you wrote for Book of Life, and there's kind of a story we also tell ourselves. Why do you think so many artists, maybe not story artists because they are trained from the very beginning, to be a storyteller, but I noticed a lot of people, they're so afraid of the screenwriting. What do you think in your experience that prevents them? Because they do have stories to tell, and they're telling themselves a story that I'm not a writer. It's kind of a label. I'm an artist. I don't know where to start. What can they do to get started as writers as well?
I think telling yourself that you are going to do this one step at a time, perfectionism kills creativity.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, I'm going to write a bad story then. And I'm going to write as many bad stories as I need to, give myself permission to, and then I'm going to write an amazing story. It's just the steps you take.
Anytime you talk to writers, one of the themes is you have to write the bad version first.
Yeah.
The important thing to realize is it's not going out live. It's
right.
No one's seeing the first draft. It doesn't matter. I mean, one of the things that's magical about storytelling is when you're able to rework and craft a story, you will think of things toward the end of the story, and then you can go back and set those things up. You have the opportunity to make it look like it was magical, coincidental thing that happened in this story. It works beautifully for the audience, and it's fairly simple because it's just rewriting. It's just reworking the story. And like you said, people get perfectionistic. They want that first draft to be perfect. They want the first thing they do, the first thing they draw to be perfect. And that is a thing that we just have to let go of.
Here's something that I think is important. Our son is a storyboard artist and a writer and a lifetime storyteller. And he wrote the first draft of an original pilot and said, hey, will you guys read this? And we had 1 million notes. And it was a good script. Mm-hmm. And it made him feel a little discouraged. And I was like, honey, Doug has been doing this for 34 years. He gets 20 pages of notes, even today.
Yeah.
Everyone gets notes. So don't let any kind of notes or criticism discourage you. It's just to make you better, because you can be good and you can still be better. And you can write a really good script, doesn't mean it's producible. So don't let criticism discourage you at all. Everybody gets it.
There's also this thing that I used to experience. I used to compare myself with what I see on the screen.
Right.
And even the latest draft, even the final draft is nothing compared to a movie that has music, amazing actors, editors, effects, and everything that, really enhances the story, and that's another trap that I think that we can all fall. And the other thing is, I wonder if it got better with time, or when you say, my first draft is going to be bad, and is it more about embracing it, or is it to be in, you mentioned 34 years, does it get better later, or is it just the process of embracing that it's going to be bad at the beginning?
I think it gets better. I think as you go along, your first draft gets better. Your first draft is never your final draft. Yeah. It's just not.
And I think that one thing that happens is, you start to develop just kind of instincts and reflexes. So there are mistakes early on that you'll make in a first draft that you might not make later on. But one of the things I would say is, as you go along, you start to realize that it's almost better if the first draft is terrible. It can actually be worse if the first draft is really good, because you are inevitably, no matter how good it is, going to have to fix things, and you're going to have to cut things, and you're going to have to change things. And it is harder to cut or change something if it was really good the first time. You're almost better off writing a really stiff, sort of weak first draft, so that it's always getting better. You always feel like it's getting better. Mm-hmm. And there's the thing that you're always saying about the sandbox.
I read that from Jordan Peele. You keep saying that that's my quote. You have to put the sand in the sandbox. That's your first draft. And then your second draft is building the sandcastle.
Yes.
But the first draft is putting in the sand. Yeah, that's not my quote.
All credit to Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
Like a similar way to say you select your wood before creating Pinocchio. It's just picking one. Do you believe in the vomit draft, the barf draft, in terms of just go with a more instinctual writing? Or do you love to plan ahead your story beats carefully before even starting?
No. And working with a team on a show, you have to do some planning, and that's a harder part for me because I write intuitively and instinctually, and I just sort of start writing and kind of get into an altered state of consciousness, and then I'm just dictating what I'm seeing in my head. And then that's when the magic happens, because it starts surprising me. That's when I get excited. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? That's what I love. That's what just excites me so much. I'm tingling right now. That's what excites me about the process. But when you're working with a team, you have to do the planning so that everyone's on the same page. And that's a little harder for me.
If you're making a short, or you're writing a sample script, or you're writing a feature script, or something that doesn't already have a bunch of other parts depending on it, it's a great idea to just write. Just don't worry about anything. Just write. Don't worry if the characters' names change. Don't worry if things that you've set up aren't paid off, or things that haven't been set up. Just get it all out there. Don't worry about structure. Don't even think about that stuff. Get it on the page, and then you can go in and start figuring out how to make it work structurally. Unfortunately, if you're doing an episode in the middle of a TV series, there's a lot of planning that's involved. So there are probably, we usually like to do a premise and then the script. On a series, if they're 11s or 22s, we usually prefer not to do outlines. It's the opportunity you have to have a little bit of that excitement of discovery. If you just know what the story is, and you kind of know what your start is and what your end point is, and then you go into the script and you can explore and play, it's more exciting, and you kind of get more interesting things.
Yeah.
First of all, you develop a muscle that, especially on TV with such a tight schedule, I would be scared to death to get into, writing in 1 week. I think that's more or less how much time do you usually get to do a script being, a 22-minute episode on TV?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. Yeah. I would be scared to death.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks and some rewriting.
That's what I'm saying. That's the ideal, but we don't really get to do that when working on a show too much.
Yeah. Usually if we're showrunners, we're probably still writing some scripts, but we're writing those scripts in addition to writing the show. So all of that writing is happening after 7 p.m.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to squeeze it in where you can.
you can do that more when you're developing the show and writing the Bible and coming up with the show than you can when you're actually writing the scripts.
I mean, shows tend to be more serialized now, and when you're doing a very serialized show, you are going to have to outline stuff in more detail. You have to make sure you're setting down the bottom bricks before the top bricks. You have to set up the things so that the payoffs are there. Otherwise, your wall will collapse.
Yeah.
And additionally, I mean, you probably are going to have a lot of executives involved who are going to want to see the different stages.
They want to see what you're doing.
Yeah, usually the outline stage is more just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Mm-hmm. And then if it's a serialized show, it's to make sure that you're laying all that groundwork.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to make some of the questions we received from, we have our membership, our group of people in the Write for Animation Academy, where we write together and encourage each other and try to hit our goals and advance in the industry. And a very common question is how to get started when planning your TV series. And many of them, they maybe wrote a bunch of spec scripts and short films, maybe a feature, and now they have their big idea for a series. And I was wondering what advice you have for them, both in the initial phase where you have to prepare a Bible that it's more a pitch deck, finding a market and some people that can allow you to take the next steps. And also we can start with that and then show the differences between the pitch Bible and a real Bible once the show gets greenlit. And any general advice you might have for someone that is starting out, that would be welcome.
I would say write in your voice with your charm and your personality, because you're really selling yourself more than you think.
Yeah.
And there's somebody who is going to love you and want to work with you.
I just talked to an executive I pitched a show and sold a show to like 20 years ago. I was talking about how a show that I pitched with no preparation. I had pitched a few things and they were like, what else do you have? And I literally started making a show up. I just started talking about stuff I did when I was a kid. And they were like, okay, we want to make that show. And I was like, that's not a show. That was just me talking about stuff I used to do. But I was talking to this executive and he said, you had sold us yourself. We just needed to know what the show was going to be. We already wanted to work with you. When you develop a show and you're pitching a show, you are pitching yourself because they need to want to work with you and make a show with you. It isn't always that important what the show is. It's going to change.
The show was The Weekenders at Disney.
I think one of the important things to remember is that no idea is precious. You will have other ideas. Like people get very focused on this great idea they have and they polish it and try to perfect it. And I think it is a little bit of that trap of perfectionism where they want to get this one thing just exactly right and then it'll be perfect and everyone will love it and they'll be safe. And the reality is you're going to have more ideas. Mm-hmm. That idea doesn't matter.
People worry about their ideas being stolen.
Yeah.
And it's like, the idea is not important, the execution of the idea. Yeah. And that's where you come in, your personality and everything about you, because you can take one idea and 10 different people are going to do it 10 different, very different ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea is not the important part.
No, I remember I used to, when I was starting out, to put the WGA registration number on top and, be very protective and things like that. Now I look back and it was just silly. It's very positive to hear from you. I encourage everybody to just share it. And if it gets stolen, first of all, it's very unlikely. And second, it's a testament that it was worth it. And I love how Jorge Gutierrez pitches the reason for the story. What is the story behind the pitch del Tigre, or the funny story about Maya and the Three. That's hilarious. And but there's a touch of himself and a touch of what are the deep reasons why you are the best person to write this story. So I really love that advice, and I think everybody should put themselves out there. Another thing is that most of the time, the person on the other side, they want to do their own show, right? It's the pitch deck or the presentation is more a sample, especially when you're starting out. Do you think that's something that you experienced? Because many people get disappointed they have this dream project and instead of seeing themselves as writers and being creative. You worked on so many shows that some of them you didn't originate the idea. Do you felt that was limiting to you, or is that a way to still express yourself?
I don't think so at all. I mean, it's very important to tell stories that no one else can tell. And I think Jorge does that very well.
Yes.
And like, if we're working with Jorge, it's just a different mindset. It's like, okay, our job here is to support Jorge in telling his story. And some of our own personal stories work in there, little micro stories. Mm-hmm. I don't find it limiting at all. It's fun. It's just I'm playing on somebody else's playground.
We're also often adapting someone else's property and then also supervising other people who are writing stuff. And everyone brings something to it. Mm-hmm. If it's a pre-existing property. I mean, one of the reasons that the team effort aspect of filmmaking is good and important is people bring things to it. And all of those things coming together make the property more relatable to a variety of people in the audience. There's an El Tigre episode that's based on a childhood experience of mine. I didn't live in Mexico City. I didn't have the circumstances of the character. I didn't have a similar background to Jorge. But like this element of my childhood fit into the world that we were making, and we got to incorporate that.
Kitty.
I love that. So first of all, don't be precious about your stories, that pitch yourself. I know that they're looking for somebody they can work with. What would you say is the number one mistake for new writers or people trying to get in that you see maybe over and over, both in the writing and the approach to the industry?
I think the biggest one is probably that overprotectiveness of the idea.
We've had people just casually, not even in a work environment, just a neighbor or whatever, say, oh, will you read my script? And then before I can, they like make us sign an NDA. And it's like, that's no.
Yeah.
Longer than the NDA from big studios, right?
Yeah. It's like people aren't actually out to get you. People want to help.
This is a mistake I made early on. Like if you show someone the script to get their feedback, listen to the feedback. Like, don't argue with the feedback.
Right, yeah.
It's always hard to hear criticism, but honest criticism is one of the most integral parts of the process. You have to be able to tell someone that something doesn't work. There are other things that you see. It's common for beginning writers to have the characters state how they feel rather than behave as someone would who feels that way. So, you'll see scripts where everything is spelled out in the dialogue, everything they're feeling, everything they want. And people don't act that way. People don't declaim their feelings. We need to feel what they're feeling, not hear it from their voice. And there's also the thing where people get really in love with creating backstory. Obviously, you need some backstory. We need to know how we got here. We're telling the now story. We're not telling the backstory. It's really fun to come up with a world and backstory and invent all this stuff, but you need to then focus it on the actual story that you're telling.
You can keep the backstory in your mind, but you don't have to put it in the script.
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin, I remember him in his masterclass, he was making the example, you might write characters allergic to peanuts and the backstory, but then if you need them to eat peanuts in the script, don't take the backstory as your Bible, and that is just an exploration element. Have the character do what they have to do. Maybe it's also a good way to procrastinate a little bit, to dig into a backstory and not feeling ready to put the things on the page.
Before we continue, I'd like to invite you to join the Write for Animation Academy. You see, I want to help you become the best storyteller you can be. When you join the Write for Animation Academy, you become part of a community where we write, learn, and support each other every step of the way. You'll have the opportunity to pitch your ideas and receive the feedback you need. Some of our members are already writing for popular TV shows. So what are you waiting for? Head over to writeforanimation.com/academy. The link is down below, and I'm excited to welcome you in our creative community. Now let's get back to Doug and Candie to learn how you can start your own TV show.
I love to get to explore the different process. We're all different, and we're getting to learn a little bit about that. If you had to go step by step in terms of, okay, you get inspired by an idea, or maybe there's something that comes to you that you think it might be a good material for a show. What are the next steps if you have to guide someone to this is what a process could look like, knowing that it could be different for everyone, but or less you experienced, I imagine, some similarities with different artists and writers and producers.
And I think if you have an idea, making sure that you understand how that idea relates to you personally. Like, you want some of yourself to be in a story that you're telling. And that's true if it's your idea or if you're adapting someone else's idea. Like, finding that heart connection to the story is important. And then I think whatever medium you're telling the story in, just start doing it. Start writing it, start drawing it, start.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Just jump in.
Just do it and work on it as much as you can every day.
And if you don't have an idea, start writing anyway. I have sat there and I wrote a conversation between the pencil and the stapler on my desk.
I love that.
Just because you need to write and then the ideas come. It's not the other way around.
In the same way that we see faces in the clouds because our brains are hardwired to turn stuff into faces, we will find a story in any random stuff we start doing. Our brains are hardwired to make stories out of things. If you read a headline, if you read just a fact, like child found in tree, you're immediately going to start thinking, like, how did that kid get up there? Why was that kid there? Is the kid okay? Did someone bring the kid down? You immediately start turning it into a story. Like, we can't help doing it. So if you start writing anything down or drawing anything, wanting to tell a story, you are eventually going to start finding those things that make it a story. And getting it all down on paper or whatever medium on the screen, and then going back and figuring out how to make it come across to an audience and how to make it a cohesive story is the way to do it. You just have to get something down.
That is correct.
I love that. You brought up two examples. I think that when you're blocked, you can always write about an object on your desk. You can always write journal and see what comes out. And so I absolutely love that example. And also the cloud example, that's how you find things that they seem like they were meant to be, but it's actually our brain find a way. What is your routine? How do you, as a habit, and has it evolved since you started?
I think at the beginning, I would procrastinate until it was desperately close to the deadline and then work furiously.
You get that adrenaline rush.
Through the night with no sleep and always get the thing done on time. Now I start earlier. I procrastinate a little bit, but not nearly as much as I used to. It's okay to get up in the morning and be like, I need some activity before I start writing. I need to have breakfast, or I need to go for a walk, or I need to do something and then start writing. Like, you don't have to get up and start writing immediately. Not every day has to start at 9 a.m. But you should be prepared if you don't get going until 2 in the afternoon, as I often don't, to potentially write until midnight. I'm not recommending that people lose sleep, and also be prepared to have some days where you write for a few hours and that's all you've got in you.
And sometimes you lose sleep because you're too excited to stop writing.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
That's fun.
So I'm remembering the day when I was working at Nickelodeon and I could not stop working on a script, writing. And I finally got done and I walked out the front door of Nickelodeon and the morning newspaper hit me in the foot.
Really?
Throwing it, they delivered the newspaper and I was like, is the sun up? Like, what happened? I had written until like 6 in the morning.
Wow.
And that will happen. Just get lost in it.
And remember, we chatted with Jorge, and he was sharing that his routine is about 8 hours a day of writing. So you really, when he gets into that, if you had like an average number of hours that you dedicate to writing, and you suggest, especially young people, to really get to it.
I don't write 8 hours a day.
No.
Jorge.
I do not either. You might have an 8-hour period that you do writing in, but some of that time is staring at the ceiling or checking your phone. I mean, inevitably.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
The part of the problem is, like, the actual physical writing, like, such a small percentage of writing is typing. The amount of time that you're actually physically typing in an 8-hour day, it might be 20 minutes. Most of writing is thinking about the thing, running through scenarios in your head and like trying out different plot lines and seeing where they go and how they can come together. And sometimes you're doing that while you're doing something else. Mm-hmm. If you can set aside 8 hours a day to write, that's great. You're not necessarily going to be physically writing all that time, but also you're probably writing when you're taking a shower. Like Jorge famously used to come into story meetings on El Tigre and be like, here are the 7 show ideas I came up with while I was taking a shower this morning. And it'd be like 7 episodes of the show, and sometimes we would make every single one. You know,
love that. Sometimes you think where you're taking a shower. Do you use index cards? Do you like to just jot down things or draw? When you're not typing words on the page, where do you find yourself working?
Usually like the notes app on my phone or my iPad. I just like, oh, I gotta write that down. I do that a lot.
Yeah, I used to like write stuff down on random pieces of paper all over the place and then try to keep track of them. Now it's mostly notes app on the phone, sometimes scribbling stuff on paper. Mostly it's just in my head. I mean, I don't even write stuff down a lot of the time.
I found some of my old notebooks when I was cleaning out my desk. I had all kinds of ideas written down from 20 years ago. And I was like, oh, hey, I can use this now.
I remember long after Dave the Barbarian, I found the first drawing I ever did of Fang.
Oh, wow.
And it was literally like a torn scrap of paper. It was like a corner of an envelope or something that I had drawn this little angry character on. My notes have gotten more concentrated in the notes app on the phone because I always have the phone. Mm-hmm. But I used to carry around a notepad for writing stuff down. I don't anymore.
But you mentioned something when we were talking about before the interview about the importance of empathy and emotional journey for the characters. I would love to end with that because I think it's a misunderstanding that sometimes comes from screenwriting books where we were taught the structure. And I would love to hear from you and learn your approach to empathy and the emotional journey.
People might forget the plot. People might forget the dialogue. They are not going to forget how you made them feel. The feelings are very important.
Yeah.
People need to be able to feel themselves in the story. We like to say our personal brand is badass compassion. It's cool to be nice. It's cool to feel things for other people.
Yeah.
And I think it reflects on the screen. Even if they just feel like when they watch your show, they're visiting their friends. Just feel something.
It's not always intense feelings. Like sometimes you want to watch a show or a movie that has a more subtle vibe to it. Like it just makes you feel kind of cozy. If you can tell a story that makes people enraged or weeping or laughing hysterically, those are all great. But like not every story is that. And they're all valid.
I still remember watching Mr. Rogers when I was a little kid, and I felt like he loved me. And I will never forget Mr. Rogers because of that.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? Is that something that comes because you tap into your own emotions personally, or you carefully track the emotional journey for the audience and I want them to feel this? And what comes first?
My own emotions, very much, yeah. But I'm an emotional person, so I have a shortcut.
I've talked before about how I used to have to pretend that I had allergies in story meetings. Because when I say or hear a story point, like a turning point in a story that works really well, I will start crying. It is absolutely out of my control. It's some sort of like physical reflex that I have. And so I would always have these story meetings where I'd be like, oh, and it's because his father died or whatever. And like just going, there's something, is there a fire? There's something in the air, there's pollen.
This air conditioning is getting to me.
I felt like I had to make excuses and I don't anymore. It's like have a gut reaction to a good story point. It's not always the right story point. We don't always wind up doing it, but like I can tell when something has got something behind it because it makes me feel.
I don't know if there's anything maybe I should have asked or something that you want to give as a final advice to writers that are starting out, that love animation, maybe they don't know how to draw themselves, they feel like it's so hard to get in. Any last piece of advice that you would like to share?
Well, I mean, you definitely don't have to be able to draw to write cartoons. It helps, but you have to be able to visualize. If you can picture the scene in your head, it's okay if you can't draw the scene. Like, you just need to know who the characters are, how they're relating, where they are physically, so that you can keep it consistent and make it make sense on the page. So I would not let inability to draw stop anyone. Like, the majority of writers can't draw.
I would say make sure you put yourself on the page, because people will want to see you. And don't write stories that anyone can tell. Write stories that only you can tell. And that will make your ideas unstealable. That will make you very valuable. You specifically, your things that only you can write.
Yeah, being vulnerable, being able to dig into the things that make you afraid. You feel almost uncomfortable sharing or exploring.
I do that all the time. It's like, here's my heart. Take a look at it.
That's beautiful. I want to thank you. It's been always on my list of people I wanted to get to know and chat with. Got to meet Jorge and even other people from different shows that you worked on. And I admire you as also, it's an incredible duo that in the industry. I love to hear your philosophy behind the beautiful stories that I got to experience on the screen. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So there's something very exciting, a new project that I cannot wait to, dig even deeper into, and it's a podcast. And I want to learn about your idea and your inspiration behind it, and what has been your journey and what we can expect.
Well, it's called Cartoon Insiders with Doug and Candie. And we talk about everything. We talk about our experiences in animation. We talk about shows we love. We give writing advice.
Just whatever pops into our head.
Whatever pops into our heads.
Yeah, it's not super structured.
It is not. It's just animation chat.
So I love that. I will definitely subscribe. I will put a link in this video and all the clips that we're going to share with the Write for Animation community. And that's something definitely if you're watching this channel, of course, you have to listen to the podcast and get a first-hand experience. So thank you so much for this time together. And I cannot wait to share this with the audience.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I've left the links to Doug and Candie's podcast in the description, so don't forget to check that out. As you've heard, empathy is key to making any story stand out. Watch this video where I share 10 ways you can use to create empathy for your characters. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more video about writing and animation, and to support the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm Pietro and this is Write for Animation. I'll see you next time.